Dear learners, welcome back to WSE English Story, where learning English becomes a remarkable journey into the minds of history's greatest thinkers. Today, we step into the world of a man whose ideas were so bold, so different, and so ahead of his time that they reshaped education, politics, and even the very meaning of personal freedom. His name is Jeremy Bentham, and although he lived more than 200 years ago, his thoughts continue to echo in every corner of modern society. Bentham was not a warrior, nor was he a king. He did not command armies or rule empires. Instead, he possessed something far more powerful, a mind that dared to ask a question almost no one else was asking in his time: why should knowledge belong only to the rich and privileged? Why shouldn't every human being, no matter their background, have the chance to study, to rise, and to shape the future? This is not just a historical tale. It is a journey into the life of a man who challenged traditions, stood against injustice, and built the intellectual foundations of one of the most inclusive and revolutionary institutions in the world, University College London. As you follow his story, you will not only improve your English, but you may also discover ideas that inspire you to question, to dream, and to act. If you'd like to support our work, you're welcome to like, comment, or share this video. Your support truly helps us continue creating meaningful content for learners everywhere. Now, let us begin the journey. Ready? Let's step into the remarkable world of Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham was born on February 15, 1748, in London, England, into a world that was both rich in tradition and rigid in social hierarchy. His family was prosperous and educated. His father, Jeremiah Bentham, was a lawyer, and his mother, Alicia White, came from a family that valued learning and refinement. From the very beginning, Jeremy was surrounded by books, ideas, and debates about law, morality, and society. Yet, despite the comforts of his upbringing, he would soon find himself questioning the rules that governed not only families like his own, but the lives of millions who had no voice or opportunity. The mid-18th century in England was a time of great contrast. On one hand, the country was experiencing economic growth, scientific discovery, and the beginnings of industrial progress. On the other, it remained deeply unequal. Education, political power, and wealth were reserved almost exclusively for the upper classes. Ordinary people, those who worked in markets, fields, or factories, had little chance to influence the world around them. The laws often favored the elite, while those without privilege suffered silently under a system that seemed permanent and unchangeable. In this environment, Jeremy showed early signs of extraordinary intelligence. By the age of 3, he could read, and by 7, he was already writing essays and questions that reflected a remarkable clarity of thought. But what truly distinguished him was his curiosity, not just about facts, but about fairness, justice, and human happiness. He often wondered why rules existed, why punishments were so harsh, and why society tolerated inequality. These questions were more than philosophical musings. They were seeds that would later grow into radical ideas capable of reshaping an entire nation. Yet, his childhood was not without pressures. The expectations of his family, society, and teachers were immense. He was a prodigy, and prodigies often feel the tension between brilliance and isolation. Jeremy learned early that to pursue truth and justice, one might have to challenge authority, question traditions, and endure criticism. These early experiences, the combination of privilege, observation of inequality, and personal pressure, shaped the foundations of a mind that would one day change the world. Imagine, for a moment, being a child who sees both the comforts of wealth and the struggles of the poor, and asking, why must this be so? Can we not do better? How would you respond if the answers you received seemed unsatisfying or unjust? This question, quietly asked in the mind of young Jeremy Bentham, would become the driving force behind a lifetime of work devoted to reform, reason, and the belief that all people deserved a chance to learn, grow, and flourish. As Jeremy Bentham grew older, his keen mind began to notice the limitations and contradictions of the world around him. School brought recognition, but it also revealed a troubling reality. Knowledge and opportunity were reserved for the few, while the many remained voiceless. Despite the comfort of his family's home and the prestige of his education, Jeremy could not ignore the suffering he observed in the streets of London, the harsh treatment of prisoners, and the stark inequality that marked daily life. He began to feel a profound discomfort, a sense that the world, as it was deeply flawed. By the age of 12, Bentham had already begun reading complex legal texts, philosophical works, and the writings of thinkers like John Locke and Montesquieu. These works fascinated him, but they also intensified his awareness of injustice. He could see the stark contrast between the law's theoretical promise of fairness and its practical reality, which often benefited only the wealthy and powerful. In his mind, society seemed blind to the needs of the majority. Laws, he realized, were too often instruments of privilege, not justice. This realization was both inspiring and painful. Jeremy felt a strong moral responsibility to challenge these inequalities, yet he also understood the difficulty of changing entrenched systems. He was still young, still surrounded by expectations that he would pursue a conventional path in law, and yet, his conscience would not allow him to simply accept the status quo. He struggled internally. How could one person, no matter how intelligent, hope to make a difference in a society so resistant to change? Around this time, he also began noticing something else. Education itself was a privilege, not a right. Only the children of wealthy families could attend the best schools and universities. Those from modest or poor families were excluded, denied the opportunity to develop their minds and improve their lives. Bentham's empathy for these children grew with each passing day. He would later reflect on this period as the moment when he first truly understood the connection between knowledge, freedom, and human happiness. Despite these challenges, Jeremy's curiosity remained unshaken. He began to write his own reflections, exploring ideas of utility, justice, and reform. He questioned whether the law could serve the greater good, whether education could be open to all, and whether society could be redesigned to reduce suffering and increase happiness. These were not small questions. They were radical ideas that would eventually define his life's work. Pause for a moment and think, if you saw unfairness so clearly as a young person, how would you act? Would you follow the safe path that everyone expected of you, or would you risk criticism and opposition to pursue what you knew was right? For Jeremy Bentham, the answer was already forming. He knew he could not remain silent. It was this emerging problem, the combination of social injustice, unequal education, and flawed laws, that set the stage for his lifelong mission. These early confrontations with the world's limitations lit a spark in him, a spark that would grow into a lifetime of ideas, debates, and action aimed at transforming society for the better. As Jeremy Bentham entered adulthood, his understanding of society's flaws deepened, and so did his determination to address them. In 1760, at the age of 12, he had already begun studying law, and by 16, he was formally enrolled in legal training. Surrounded by the grandeur of England's courts and legal institutions, he observed the ways in which laws favored wealth and power over fairness and human welfare. Every case he studied revealed another layer of inequality, another example of a system that neglected the majority. Rather than deterring him, these observations fueled his determination. Bentham's first journey was not one of physical travel but of intellectual exploration. He immersed himself in philosophy, moral reasoning, and the study of human behavior. He became particularly fascinated by the concept of utility, the idea that actions should aim to produce the greatest happiness for the greatest number. This principle, radical for its time, became the cornerstone of his thinking and the lens through which he would examine every law, every institution, and every social convention. Yet, as he wrestled with these ideas, Bentham encountered resistance, not only from society but from within his own family. His parents, well-meaning but conservative, expected him to follow a conventional legal career and perhaps secure a prestigious position in government. They could not fully understand his radical thoughts or his growing insistence that law and education should serve all people, not just the privileged few. Bentham faced a painful choice: conform to expectations for comfort and security or pursue the uncertain path of reform. His decision to embrace the latter would define his life. During this period, he also experimented with writing. He drafted essays, treatises, and reflections, attempting to articulate his vision of a society guided by reason, justice, and utility. He wrote about penal reform, criticizing cruel punishments and advocating for systems that rehabilitated rather than harmed. He imagined prisons designed not to punish arbitrarily but to educate and reform, shaping citizens who could contribute meaningfully to society. Despite his brilliance, the path was lonely. Many contemporaries dismissed his ideas as impractical or dangerous. He faced skepticism from teachers, legal authorities, and peers who could not envision a society organized around universal education and fairness. Yet Bentham's resilience was extraordinary. He believed that ideas, no matter how controversial, could eventually influence the world if articulated clearly, argued rigorously, and defended persistently. During these formative years, he also began to consider a broader vision, opening education to all, not just the elite. He dreamed of a university where wealth, social status, or birthright would not determine access. Such a vision was revolutionary, almost unimaginable in 18th-century England. But Bentham did not shy away from imagining it. In the quiet of his study, surrounded by books and manuscripts, he envisioned classrooms filled with eager learners from every walk of life, guided by reason and knowledge rather than privilege. Here, dear learners, let me ask you, if you had an idea that challenged everything society believed, would you have the courage to defend it? To risk criticism, isolation, or even ridicule for something you knew could make life better for millions? Bentham's answer was yes, and it was this courage that carried him forward through the struggles and setbacks of his early life. His first journey was, in many ways, an inner journey, a struggle to reconcile the ideals he envisioned with the reality of a society resistant to change. It was during these years that he honed not only his intellect but his patience, persistence, and the moral courage that would define his later achievements. The path was arduous, but it was shaping a man capable of transforming not only ideas but institutions, and eventually, the lives of countless individuals. The turning point in Jeremy Bentham's life came not as a sudden event but as a series of profound realizations that forced him to confront the limits of his society, and to commit himself fully to reform. By the 1770s, he had completed his formal legal training and had begun a career that could have secured him wealth, comfort, and prestige. Yet, as he observed the legal system in action, he was increasingly convinced that mere participation within it was not enough. Laws were not neutral instruments of justice, they were often tools that reinforced inequality, ignored human suffering, and protected the interests of the few at the expense of the many. One decisive moment occurred when Bentham studied the conditions of prisons in England. He visited the jails of London and other cities, witnessing firsthand the cruelty, overcrowding, and neglect inflicted on prisoners. Cells were filthy and dark, punishments were brutal, and inmates were frequently abandoned to disease and despair. Bentham realized that the legal system he had trained to serve was failing the very people it was supposed to protect. This confrontation with human suffering sparked a moral urgency that transformed his abstract philosophical ideas into practical ambitions. It was also during this period that Bentham began drafting the principles that would become his monumental work on utilitarianism, the philosophy that human actions should aim to maximize happiness and minimize suffering. He wrote with unprecedented clarity about the purpose of law, government, and social institutions. They should exist not to preserve privilege, but to promote the well-being of all. This idea was radical, even dangerous. To suggest that the rights and privileges of the powerful should be questioned, that education and opportunity should be extended to all, was to challenge the very foundations of British society. Yet Bentham's turning point was not only intellectual, it was deeply personal. He faced criticism, misunderstanding, and even mockery from colleagues, authorities, and family members who saw his ideas as eccentric or impractical. Some questioned whether he was naive to believe that society could ever be fair, or that education could ever be accessible to the masses. Others accused him of overstepping moral boundaries, daring to suggest that justice and happiness could be measured and improved systematically. These attacks might have discouraged a lesser mind. For Bentham, they became fuel. He understood that transformation required courage, persistence, and the willingness to endure opposition for the sake of a greater ideal. It was also a period of creative intensity. He began writing treatises that outlined detailed proposals for legal reform, education, and social improvement. He conceived of a university unlike any before, a place where students would be admitted based on merit, not wealth, where learning was a right, not a privilege. Though he would not see the university completed in his lifetime, the seeds of what would become University College London were planted during these years. Imagine, for a moment, standing alone with your ideas in a world that tells you they are impossible. How strong must your conviction be to keep moving forward? Bentham's response was unwavering. He realized that true progress required challenging tradition, enduring criticism, and remaining steadfast in pursuit of justice. The turning point in his life was not a single dramatic event but the awakening of an inner resolve that no obstacle could diminish. This period set the stage for the climactic struggle of his life. With principles clarified, courage solidified, and vision firmly established, Bentham was ready to confront the societal barriers that stood between his ideals and reality. The moral urgency that had first awakened in his youth now demanded decisive action, and Bentham prepared to make choices that would test his endurance, ethics, and faith in humanity itself. The greatest challenge of Jeremy Bentham's life was not merely intellectual, it was moral, emotional, and deeply personal. By the 1780s, he had fully committed to the ideas that had grown within him since childhood, that human happiness should be the ultimate goal of law, that social institutions should serve everyone equally, and that education was a right, not a privilege. But committing to these ideals meant facing powerful resistance from a society deeply invested in maintaining its hierarchy and traditions. The path forward would demand both sacrifice and unwavering courage. Bentham faced a society resistant to change. The legal establishment scoffed at his proposals, dismissing them as theoretical exercises without practical application. Politicians feared the implications of his radical ideas, worried that empowering the majority with knowledge and education could destabilize the status quo. Wealthy elites, who had benefited from centuries of privilege, were largely indifferent, or hostile, to the notion that social structures should serve the greater good. To pursue his vision, Bentham would have to risk alienation, financial uncertainty, and social isolation. Yet his resolve was unshakable. Bentham understood that true reform required more than criticism or ideas, it required concrete action. He devoted himself to writing meticulously detailed treatises on legal reform, on education, and on social welfare. These works outline not only philosophical principles but practical solutions. For example, he proposed systematic changes to prisons to make them more humane and rehabilitative, envisioned educational institutions open to all who could benefit, and argued for laws to maximize public happiness rather than protect privilege. Each proposal was revolutionary, each challenge a direct confrontation with entrenched power. During this time, Bentham made a conscious choice. He would dedicate his life to ideas that might not bring immediate recognition, wealth, or approval. He sacrificed the conventional rewards of a legal career, the comfort of social acceptance, and even the chance of personal acclaim. Instead, he committed to a vision that valued human well-being over personal gain. This decision required immense patience and inner strength. For decades, he labored largely in obscurity, writing, debating, and refining ideas that many contemporaries dismissed as impractical or visionary fantasies. One of the most profound sacrifices Bentham made was to prioritize the long-term impact of his work over immediate gratification. He understood that real change takes time and that the seeds he planted might only bear fruit after his lifetime. His commitment was a moral act as much as an intellectual one. He willingly bore the loneliness of a life devoted to ideas, trusting that the future would recognize their importance. Here, dear learners, reflect for a moment. Have you ever faced a choice between following your own principles and taking the safer, easier path? What would you do if the world around you resisted every step toward your ideal? Bentham's example shows that sometimes, true courage is not loud or dramatic, it is the quiet, persistent dedication to what you know is right, even when recognition is far away. This period of intense effort, inner struggle, and unwavering dedication laid the groundwork for the achievements that would define his legacy. Bentham's sacrifices were not in vain, they built the moral and intellectual foundation for reforms that would eventually reshape education, law, and society itself. The climax of his conflict was not only in the external challenges he faced but in the personal choices he made, to prioritize justice over convenience, vision over comfort, and humanity over social approval. In these decisive years, Bentham transformed from a brilliant but questioning young man into a philosopher of extraordinary resolve, a man willing to endure isolation, misunderstanding, and hardship to bring his vision of a fairer, happier world to life. This was the crucible in which his principles were forged, and it is this courage, this dedication, that continues to inspire us today. Jeremy Bentham's unwavering dedication to justice, education, and human happiness began to bear fruit in ways that would echo far beyond his own lifetime. While he did not live to see all of his visions fully realized, the structures he helped conceptualize, the ideas he championed, and the reforms he inspired marked the triumph of intellect and moral courage over complacency and tradition. One of Bentham's greatest achievements was the intellectual foundation he laid for utilitarianism. By articulating that the ultimate aim of law and society should be the greatest happiness of the greatest number, he offered a clear principle to guide moral and legal decision-making. This idea influenced not only legal scholars but politicians, social reformers, and thinkers across generations. Bentham's concept of utility provided a lens through which societies could measure the success of laws, institutions, and social policies, emphasizing human welfare over privilege. His advocacy for education reform also had a lasting impact. Bentham dreamed of a university open to all, where merit, ability, and curiosity, not wealth or social status, determined access. While he did not live to see the university built, his ideas directly inspired the founding of University College London in 1826. This institution embodied Bentham's vision. It welcomed students of all religious backgrounds, provided access to the middle classes, and promoted learning as a right rather than a privilege. In doing so, it challenged centuries of elitism in British education and opened doors for generations who might otherwise have been excluded. Bentham's influence extended to legal and social reform as well. His detailed proposals for humane treatment in prisons, the codification of laws, and the systematic evaluation of public policies helped shift the focus from punishment to rehabilitation, fairness, and the public good. While some of his reforms were implemented gradually, his writings provided a blueprint for future generations of reformers, establishing a moral standard against which society could measure justice. His victories were not always public or immediate, yet they carried profound significance. Bentham demonstrated that ideas, if pursued with patience, clarity, and courage, could reshape institutions and inspire lasting change. He showed that intellectual labor, moral conviction, and persistence could achieve victories that outlast any individual, echoing across generations. Dear learners, pause for a moment and consider this. How many ideas in your life might seem small or ignored today, but could, with persistence, create real change tomorrow? Bentham's life reminds us that even in a world resistant to reform, one person's vision can grow into a force that changes society. His achievements were not merely institutional or theoretical, they were moral victories, proof that enduring dedication to human welfare, fairness, and knowledge could overcome centuries of entrenched privilege. Bentham's vision for education, law, and society was bold, but his persistence made it achievable. He transformed challenges into opportunities and ideas into institutions, leaving a legacy that continues to educate, inspire, and influence the world. In this chapter of his life, Bentham reached a quiet yet profound triumph. The battles he fought, the sacrifices he made, and the obstacles he overcame had resulted in tangible and lasting contributions to humanity. From the founding of University College London to the enduring principles of utilitarian thought, Jeremy Bentham's work proved that courage, reason, and vision could indeed shape a better, fairer world. Jeremy Bentham's life was a testament to the power of ideas, courage, and perseverance. From the curious child who questioned inequality on the streets of London to the philosopher who reshaped the principles of law and education, his journey shows us that a single mind, committed to justice and human welfare, can leave a mark that outlasts centuries. His legacy is not only in the institutions he inspired or the writings he left behind, but in the moral vision he embodied, that society should serve all its members, not just the privileged few. One of the most enduring lessons from Bentham's life is the transformative power of persistence. Faced with criticism, skepticism, and societal resistance, he chose to continue pursuing his ideals rather than seek comfort in conformity. His example encourages us to consider the challenges in our own lives, whether in learning, work, or personal growth, and to persist even when progress feels slow or recognition seems distant. Success is often the result of quiet, consistent effort guided by clear principles. Bentham also teaches us the importance of empathy and moral imagination. He saw the suffering of prisoners, the struggles of the poor, and the limits imposed by unequal education, and he refused to ignore them. Instead, he transformed his empathy into action, devising practical reforms and envisioning systems that could genuinely improve human happiness. His life challenges us to ask, how can we use our knowledge, skills, and creativity to benefit others, not only ourselves? Education, according to Bentham, is a powerful equalizer. By advocating for a university open to all, he made a radical statement. learning should not be a privilege but a right. Today, University College London stands as a living monument to this vision. But the lesson extends beyond a single institution. Bentham reminds us that providing opportunities for knowledge and growth empowers individuals and strengthens society as a whole. Finally, his life underscores that true change often requires sacrifice and courage. Bentham accepted isolation, criticism, and delayed recognition because he believed in a higher purpose. His moral and intellectual bravery encourages us to consider what we value most, comfort and approval, or the pursuit of justice and meaningful impact. Dear learners, ask yourself, if you had the chance to challenge an unfair system or create something that benefits many, would you take it, even if it meant struggle or sacrifice? Bentham's life shows that the rewards of courage, empathy, and vision far outweigh the temporary comfort of inaction. His story continues to inspire those who believe that ideas, when pursued with dedication, can change the world. Dear learners, we have journeyed together through the remarkable life of Jeremy Bentham, a man who dared to challenge tradition, question injustice, and envision a world where education and opportunity were available to all. His story reminds us that the courage to think differently, the patience to persist, and the compassion to care for others can create a legacy far greater than ourselves. Bentham once said, "The greatest happiness of the greatest number is the foundation of morals and legislation." This simple but profound idea continues to guide societies today, urging us to measure our actions by their impact on human welfare. Now, consider this: how can you apply Bentham's principles in your own life? Can your choices, your learning, or your actions create a ripple of positive change in the world around you? Every effort, no matter how small, has the potential to grow into something meaningful when guided by purpose and empathy. If Bentham's story inspired you, share it with someone else. Discuss his ideas, reflect on his courage, and carry forward the message that knowledge, fairness, and opportunity belong to all. And, of course, support our channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Each action helps us continue bringing stories that educate, inspire, and empower English learners like you. Until next time, remember the lessons of Jeremy Bentham: hope, justice, and knowledge are worth pursuing, no matter the obstacles. Keep learning, keep dreaming, and keep striving to make the world a better place. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you in the next story.